Hallo.
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 So, Luisa hat mir auch gerade geschrieben. Achso, sie kommt gleich.
Mhm. Die war heute im Haus auch. Ich weiß nicht, ob sie es von...
Die ist, glaube ich, auch im Haus, ja.
Ah ja, und macht
Also
es
ich
von der
bin selber
Bibliothek.
zu Hause. Ja,
Macht von der Bibliothek aus, ja.
genau.
Ja. Gut, und es sind 40 Leute angemeldet, das ist ganz viel, ja.
Genau, es
Ganz
sind
schön.
sogar noch ein paar mehr geworden, glaube
Ja,
ich.
das glaube ich, ja.
Na gut, 43.
Ja.
Ja.
Also ich habe hier die Liste, die ich heute gekriegt habe, habe ich 41, ja. Aber aus
Genau,
ganz...
sind noch 2 dazugekommen.
Ja, habe ich.
Ein
Viel.
Diego Fortes oder so, aber aus Deutschland.
Okay, das sind Humboldt-Kollegen, glaube ich.
Ah ja.
Mhm. Also da wollte ich jedenfalls welche einladen, ja.
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 Ja, schön. Ja,
Aber
mal
sind
gucken, wie
auch...
viele kommen.
Ja, genau. Das ab.
Genau, wir nehmen es auf jeden Fall ja auf.
Mhm. Ich habe mir schon aufgeschrieben, dass ich das bekannt gebe, ja.
Ja, prima. Sonst sagst nur du was, ne? Also
Naja,
Luisa
es
halt.
gibt Diskussionen, da können
Und
sich Leute
Diskussion,
melden.
genau. Ja, ja. Aber jetzt an Präsentationen
Ja,
oder sowas.
ja. Und ich denke mal, sie hat Folien. Sie wird also einen Bildschirm teilen wollen.
Denke ich auch, ja, ja.
Also wenn die alle kommen, ist Porticus, unser Förderpartner, ganz stark vertreten. Das sind 6 Leute von Porticus. Ja.
Ach ja, guck.
Ja.
Ja. Bei der Sense ist auch dabei.
Ja.
Ja.
Noch ein bisschen Zeit ist noch. Da sieht es bei mir immer ein bisschen wie eine Höhle aus, aber mehr Licht habe ich nicht in dem Zimmer. Also ich mache schon alles an, was geht, aber mehr ist nicht.
Aber man sieht dein Gesicht gut.
Ja, das
Von
ist
dem-
wegen der Schreibtischlampe.
Ah ja.
Und,
Ich finde, es geht, ist nicht zu dunkel. Dafür habe ich hier so ein komisches Licht im Gesicht.
ja.
Ja.
Aber von uns hat sich sonst niemand angemeldet. Nicht schade.
Ja, ich schicke es ja immer noch mal an Team und Gremium auch sowieso den Zoom-Link, weil ich immer
Ach
denke,
so,
vielleicht kommt
also
dann noch
gleich.
so jemand dazu.
Okay, ja.
Also vielleicht.
Ja,
kommt
schön.
noch jemand.
Ja.
Ja.
Denn das ist wirklich spannend, was sie da rausgebracht hat. Auch.
Ja, ist auch nicht ein Thema, was so oft in der Art beleuchtet wird, oder?
So ist es, ja. Es ist aktuell und jeder faselt so ein bisschen, aber es wird nicht wirklich mal behandelt.
Ja.
Aha. Einer ist Bonin University, das ist in Nigeria.
Ach, krass, ja.
Ja. Ja.
Ja, interessant. So, sie meint, sie kommt, aber noch ist sie nicht im Warteraum.
Okay.
Mal gucken.
No, jetzt müsste sie aber mal kommen, sonst, damit sie noch. Ja.
Ah, sie sagt gerade, ihr Computer updatet gerade Zoom. Okay. Ah, jetzt ist sie da.
Okay.
Ja.
Luisa? Ah, there you are.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. You all can hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
training because I think I have too many slides, so I will try to not use
Don't
all
worry.
of them.
Don't worry. Yes. For some reason, the books behind you are blurred, but
I will unblur them.
That's something you can. Yeah, that's better. That looks nicer. Yeah. Very good.
And then you present, and then I present around 20 minutes, and then Q&A. Maybe
and then Q&A. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Yes. Don't worry if you take a little longer. 20 minutes is a good measure, but if you take a few moments longer, don't worry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And as we have quite a lot of people signed up who've never been in touch with us before, I will spend about 2 minutes just explaining who we are. Yeah.
Okay, of course. And I will share my presentation from here, Marianne.
Yes.
Marianne? Okay.
Yeah, I've already made you co-host.
All right.
And I will just make Rupert co-host just in any case.
Okay, yes, but I don't have any slides now.
No, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Might happen.
Here's somebody wanting to come in. We can let people in, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to try out to the, okay. You want to check your presentation? Or...
Yeah, I will. I can.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, fine. Right. Welcome to those who've already come in. You're very welcome to turn your camera on so we see you. And perhaps if you leave your microphone off if you're not speaking, that would be helpful. Hello to those who've already come in. We will wait for another couple of minutes before we start, and you're welcome to put your camera on so that we can see you and you can see each other. There should be quite a lot more people coming in.
Yes, I'm not sure if everyone, I guess everyone received the email, but with the link. Oh yeah, Feedback Labs is here, so maybe just they are just getting. For those entering now, we are just waiting a little bit for others to enter before we start.
We'll wait another. Oh. Hello.
Hi, good to see you.
Okay, I think we might as well get started, and more people will hopefully be coming in as we go along. So welcome to this colloquium, which we are having in honor of Luisa and in honor of the work that she has been doing while she was with us as a German Chancellor Fellow, invited by the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation and hosted by the Maecenata Foundation. From our point of view, her fellowship with us has been extremely successful, and whether she thinks the same, I don't know, but perhaps she will tell us. She will today, of course, present the findings of her research, and we're looking forward to that. Before we get started, just a couple of household remarks. For one, this session is being recorded so that people who can't come in at this point can then see it and hear it later. Second, you're very welcome to turn your camera on so that we can see you, and that you should kindly leave your mic off to improve the quality of the transmission. Third thing is, when we come to the questions and answers, I would prefer it if you could just put your comments or questions in the chat, and then we can sort them out a little bit. But if you feel you really must talk about them and say something, please put up your hand in where it's indicated. Before we get started, just a few words for those of you who've never been in touch with the Maecenata Foundation. A few words about the foundation. I'm Rupert Strachwitz. I'm the executive director of the foundation, and what we are is a think tank. We are a think tank on civil society and philanthropy, and we have 4 permanent programs through which we operate. So we're very untypical. We're not basically a grant-making institution. Our programs are, our core program is the Maecenata Institute, to which Luisa was attached, an independent academic research center. Our second permanent program is the Tocqueville Forum, which is in charge of our watchdog function and our policy activities and of our library. You can see a little bit of the library behind Luisa. That's part of it. And our third program is transnational giving, which is in helping philanthropy across borders. We're in a partnership with 20 other European institutions on that point. And our fourth program is small but very effective, a MENA, Middle East, North Africa study center. So that's what we do. Luisa was with the Maecenata Institute doing her research, slightly impeded by COVID, of course, as everybody else was, but still, I think she managed to achieve some very interesting results. They are published in our online series Opuscula, and also they will be published in a publication for Philea, the European Philanthropy Association, and they will also be published in a publication in Brazil, in Portuguese. So we're very happy that all the things she has found out will be disseminated properly. Okay, so with that, I turn over to you, Luisa. Tell us what you found.
Thank you so much, Rupert, for the introduction. Thank you, Marianne, for organizing all this meeting. And also thank you very much for everyone here. Appreciate the presence. And yes, just to spend a quick minute to thank to everyone, and especially for Maecenata Foundation and to Rupert, who during all my fellowship journey supported me and encouraged me all the things that I wanted to understand and learn. And I think this is a extremely privileged opportunity, and I wish everyone could have it, but especially to have like the support and people that believe in what you want to achieve. So this is super important. Thank you so much again. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I prepared a small presentation. It's not so small, but I will try to be very quick. And after the presentation, we will have time for Q&A. So Marianne, we are all seeing my screen right now? Cool, great, thanks. So, oops. Here and here. So without further ado, let's start. Okay, so my final paper is How Foundations and Funders Listen. So it's a qualitative review in Europe and in Brazil. Why this research? So it starts with the point that understanding that how foundations and funders listen to those who matter the most for their work and how they take their voices into account when making decisions. This is a fundamental question in philanthropy and in social impact efforts, and also by believing that this is directly related with how society deposits trust in philanthropy. Maecenata Foundation published an incredible work called Philanthropy Impact Project, which is a self-assessment tool for foundations that promotes trust in philanthropy, and several questions of that self-assessment tool are related of how foundations listen and take beneficiaries' voices into account. So yes, and I had the chance to translate that to Portuguese, so everyone who also wants to read this material in Portuguese, we have now access to. Two big influences of this work, and I also want to acknowledge Alex's presence here from Feedback Labs in US, is the first one is the feedback methodology to philanthropy and aid. So when I started to try to understand how funders listen, I discovered feedback labs in US and then feedback methodology to philanthropy and aid. And then I was very fortunate that Maecenata supported me to go to US, and also Feedback Lab supported me, and I work as volunteer into their event. I did the course about methodology and tried to understand what was the qualitative parts of listening. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the sequence, but feedback methodology is one of the biggest influences of that paper. And the second influence also is a report that is already published by this organization in US as well, that is called Écoute Consulting. So they did a review of foundation listening practices, and I also used some of the questions that they made, so the script and how to organize the type of listening based on this report. The methodology. So I sent more than 60 asks for interviews, and I interviewed 12 organizations in Brazil and 13 in Europe, plus 5 experts. So why Europe and Brazil? We would start just in Germany, but then after I went to the Philia event, so the Philanthropy Association of Europe event, I saw that it was also nice to have another organizations from Europe, and I maintained Brazil since it's easier with the language, with Portuguese, and it's also my country. So Brazil and Europe, it's not anymore about the regions, but more about the practice. So all the participations were anonymous, only demographic data was shared. It was a qualitative interviews, and what I did is that the discoveries that I made, I coded and grouped to facilitate the analysis, but of course the sample is not representative of any region. So you will see percentages, but that percentages are from the interviewed. What we asked them, just so we know what we have in the paper, why they listen, when, whom they listen, how, if they have feedback in the process, if they have reporting back in the process, how they deal with power imbalance relations, what are the relevant skills in the listening process that each individual staff needs to have, and what are the challenges of the listening process. A little bit of the profile of participants. So we had organizations in Europe from Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Austria. And 69% were private foundations with national and international reach. While in Brazil, we have 41% of them private foundations, 42% corporate foundations, and 70% companies and their areas of sustainability or social responsibility. And that's why, that's because in Brazil, the corporate sector is extremely relevant in social investment. So that's why I also include them. You see that the budget has a big discrepancy. So the budget of the organizations interviewed in Europe are 100 times bigger than the combined budget of the organizations in Brazil. And then let's start with why they listen. So the tendency of organizations in Brazil and in Europe are very much similar. So they listen to improve impact, to better understand the problem, and to improve the relationship with the grantee. We see that also in Europe, 100% of the organizations mention that they listen to improve the relationship with grantee, while just 42% of the organizations in Brazil mention that. So while they follow the same tendency, the numbers are a little bit different. When they listen. So we also ask them in which part of the project life cycle they listen. And so we suggested strategy formulation, grants attribution, implementation, evaluation, project renewal, and exit. So here we ask them to indicate in which part of the project life cycle that listening occurs, but we also ask them to prioritize 2 phases when the listening is more important and they focus more. So we see that in Europe, organizations focus more in listening during strategy formulation and evaluation, while in Brazil, they also focus in strategy formulation, but they give the same priority during implementation and evaluation. So this also made me to understand, and also during the interviews with the organizations in Europe, because most of them say that they are relationship-based funders, but when they realize that they listen more during just in the beginning and just in the end, they realize that, okay, maybe we can listen more during the implementation. So this is one of the insights that we have from that part. One moment. And then we see that the most listened stakeholders are the primary constituents and the grantees. So one concept that is very important is that in this paper, we don't call final beneficiaries or beneficiaries. We use the concept of primary constituents, and that is because the feedback methodology use the concept of primary constituents, because the methodology understands that in order to give the voice and the agency to the ones that philanthropy supports, we can somehow see them in a passive position. So that's why we call them constituents or primary constituents. So primary constituents and grantees are the most listened stakeholders. And of course, in Brazil, we have also company strategy because of the profile of our interviewed. One thing about the listening practices, you are going to find a series of different forms of listening in the paper. It was not possible to include all of them here. But one important information is that in Europe, foundations collectively cited 29 different forms, but then in average, each one of them used 5. And then in Brazil, they collectively cited 10 different forms. There were some forms of listening that just Brazil had. For example, they cited the reporting phase, the actual report, as a form of listening. And also some organizations in Brazil say that they have a person from the staff that is responsible for the relationship with the community. And on average, organizations in Brazil, they also use 3 forms of listening. So in the beginning, I was thinking, okay, we have another huge discrepancy here, 29 different methods against 10, but we need to analyze that data in layers as well, because in Brazil, they have a geographic focus that is regional or national. So organizations are in the same country, they are in the same language, they understand better their realities, so they don't need complex forms of listening or more fancy forms of listening. That organizations that are in Europe funding other organizations in Africa, for example, or Latin America, they need to use different and more sophisticated forms of listening because they don't share the same culture or same language. Another thing is about the project phase where listening occurs. So as Brazil also prioritizes listening during implementation, the conversations with the organizations are more frequent, and also that makes that maybe it's not so necessary to use complex forms and the budget. So as we saw, the budget are completely different, and organizations need to do listening with what they have. So this is one of the possible analyses. And then feedback in the process. One thing that is very important is to understand what is feedback. So Feedback Labs says that feedback is the perceptions of the primary constituents or the constituents, the emotions about the service provided. So it's not only reporting, okay, what was the result of the project? Did you have access to water? But do you like it, the service that give you access to water? Have you felt, do you trust the organization that give you the service? So it's not only about the results, but also the relationship. So we ask the organizations if they have feedback in their process, and all of them say that they do have space for feedback. And the main difference was if they have like a institutionalized form of feedback, meaning that is already standardized in the cycle of the project and uses anonymous survey, for example, but it's something that always occurs, or if something that just happens during the conversations. So we see that.
Luisa, sorry to interrupt. Should you be moving along the slides a little bit? Because we're still on the title page.
My gosh, I'm moving, but I'm moving since the beginning. Oh my gosh, I need to stop sharing. Oh my God.
Now you can move the slides as you go along.
No, I'm moving, but I don't know what happened with Zoom, because okay, I was already here.
Now you will find.
Now we can see it.
Yeah, now we can see. Yeah.
I changed it just to understand if it's now working, the changing of slides.
Yeah.
Okay. I will ask right now next time. Sorry about that. I imagine that it was not easier to follow. Okay. All right. So yes, that's the numbers. So organizations in Europe, they give more space for institutionalized feedback than in Brazil. But a lot of organizations in Brazil say that happened during the conversations with the organizations, and they give examples. One example was just to share with you that, okay, in the feedback process, we also, as organization, share things that we as funder did not succeed. So they share their errors with the organizations as well. So we see that there also, it's not just about having the space, but there are more complexity on that analysis. But if you just look at the yes or no institutionalized space, that are the results. I just changed my slide. Everyone is seeing a new slide?
No, and I think you need to switch it to presentation mode. We only see.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you've got it up there, apprentice how, yeah. And then you will find a device. It's usually bottom left where you can then move the slides.
Okay, so I would just stop sharing for a bit.
Oh.
Share.
Now you share the screen.
Yeah, I'm trying. No, now I stop it, but I'm trying to do.
Share the screen.
Okay.
And now up at the top you will see something called Aprendizado de slides.
No, but I'm here. It's this one, right?
I think, can you check which screen you're sharing, like which window you're sharing, basically? Because sometimes when you stop sharing and then you start sharing, it might ask you which window you want to share.
Yeah, I was sharing the right one, but yeah, there's a way of sharing that it's advanced way of sharing virtual background. Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that way,
Yes. And do you
Yeah.
see a device at the bottom with arrows? Then you can. Then then you can move along. Yeah.
now everyone is seeing my,
Yeah. Now we're
Okay.
seeing slide 4 and 5,
Okay.
6. Yeah.
all right. So
Yeah.
sorry about that. So you see that I thought that I placed all of that.
Yeah.
I can share the presentation with everyone after. Okay, and then we have the reporting back process. So another very important part of the listening process in the feedback methodology is the reporting back phase. So is when the organization that asked for feedback for the information share with those who share their voices. So if you go to a community, for example, and you ask in a community how they perceive your service, and then what to do with that information. So in the feedback methodology, one very important part of the process is that you need to report back to those who give their voices and to say what you understand from their input, and also what you're going to do about that. Doesn't matter if you're going to change something, of course, that will be awesome, but also if you're not able to change. So okay, we listen from you that you want that the service take place at evenings instead of the afternoon. So we are able to do that, and that's going to be starting as follows, blah, blah, blah. Or no, we are not going to be able to do that right now because of that, and that. So that's something that is very important in the feedback methodology. And we ask the organizations if they have that. So in Europe, 46% of them say that they have this phase of reporting back. And that is mainly because they use grantee perception reports. So if you go to the paper, you're going to be able to see the reports that are the forms of reporting back. And organizations most of the organizations that do grantee perception reports, they also share what they learn with the grantees in form of a report, for example, of an article, for example, and what they are going to do after that. But still 31% say that they do not report back, and or 50% say that is an organic process. So in the conversations, that process of reporting back happened. And 8% say that they do not do that, but something that they are starting to work on it. In Brazil, we have different data from that. So most of the organizations in Brazil, 59% say that it is an organic process. 8% say that it's something that's going to be addressed. Just 8% say that it happens in an institutionalized process, and 8% also say, okay, that happens, but not in all projects. So that's something that depends a lot of the projects of the organization. So something that we learn from here is that in different levels, both Europe and Brazil, there are lots of room to grow the report back phase. And then, okay. And then one thing that we also asked them was about power imbalance. So understanding that all this feedback, this report back, this listening process is affected by power imbalance. We asked them, okay, do you talk about power imbalance relations with the grantees or with the primary constituents among the foundation staff? How the foundation deals with that topic? And then in Europe, we heard that 69% talk openly about that topic inside the foundation, within the foundation staff. And mainly in Brazil, they say 58%, they say yes, but it's not open. So in that topic of power imbalance relations, I felt a big difference between Europe and in Brazil in a way that they talk about that within the staff. I'm not sure, I don't know exactly why that happens. So there's a lot of room to try to understand the nuances of why this happens. And one of the possible is that because they are so in Europe, or organizations work with international partners, so they are already know the difference of their positions to the other partners. And in Brazil, organizations work with grantees or other beneficiaries that sometimes they are in the same city and the same cultural in the same culture, so they don't see so much difference between them. Okay, and all right. Okay, and then I also asked them about the actions to mitigate power imbalance. So all the organizations interviewed, they gave us 32 strategies to mitigate power imbalance. So this is just an example of the ones most mentioned, but in the paper you can see lots of strategies. So for example, developing long-term relationships with grantees is a strategy that was very much mentioned in both Brazil and Europe. Simplifying reporting process, having internal discussions about power imbalance, offering flexible or core funding. So I think this is a good list to see if organizations want to better their listening practices. Okay, we have so much actions to mitigate power imbalance that we can start. Maybe some of them are going to be easier and simple. Some of them, of course, are going to be complex, but there are a lot of options to start. Okay. And then I also asked them about the relevant skills of the staff during the listening process. So we also see that the tendency in Europe and in Brazil are pretty much connected. And in the beginning, I thought that most of the interview would say to me, okay, empathy is the main skill relevant, but actually self-awareness and growth mindset, we can see that is in the top of the list as well. And that because, of course, listening is not just about listening other people, but also is about how you understand and how you perceive that. So one of the insights of that is that working on self-awareness, on coaching to the staff to understand their listening practices as an individual before the interacting phase is also pretty much important to enhance the listening practices in an organization. And then also the tendency is pretty much the same in Europe and in Brazil. We have more skills mentioned in the interacting phase in Brazil, but it's just slightly different than in the managing ourselves part. And probably that's because we have organizations in Brazil that are more that have more relationships during the implementation phase of the projects. Okay, and then you are also going to see in the paper that after I asked about the challenges in the listening process to the organizations, there were so many layers of challenges that I decided to put these challenges in levels. So we are going to see that we used Edward Hall cultural iceberg model. We will have the external level, we have just under the surface level, and we have deep under the water level. And just to give some examples because the challenges are long. For in the external level are the challenges that we see easily, and they are also more easy to solve, as for example, time restrictions. So staff don't have much time to develop relationship with the grantees. And then the just under the face, an example is the lack of transparency about foundations, limitations, and decisions. So sometimes this is something that it's not so easy to see, and it's also not so easy to tackle. And then when we go deep into the water, for example, in the deepest level is patriarchal and top-down approaches to philanthropy. So that's something that is very hard to address with everyone and hard to change. So there's different levels of challenges in the listening process that you will see. And I also separate that in the paper. In Europe and in Brazil, you see there are some differences in these challenges. And then we have the level of participation. So after all after having all the data, I used this International Association for Public Participation framework. This is the same framework that the report from US, Bridging the Gap, uses, but Bridging the Gap did an adaptation of this framework, and I decided just to use this framework as it is. So I placed the organizations in that levels of participation, and the level of participation depends of the participation goal of the public, but also what is the promise that we give to the public when they give us the information. So we have the informed level, and of course I invite you to read that deeply in the paper, but we have the informed level, we have the consult level, we have the involving level, the collaborating level, and we have the empower level. And this is the data that we have. So we see that in Europe and in Brazil, most of the organizations are at the informed level. And that means that they ask information from the public, and their promise to the public is that they will keep the public informed about the decisions, just about that. They will not, they do not promise to consider, for example, the decisions. And then we have the consult level, that 31% of organizations in Europe are on this level, and 17% are in Brazil are in this level. 8% of the organizations in Europe are in the involve level, and in empower level, we have just 8% as well from the European organizations. So the only the organizations that are at the empower level is because they have a participatory grant making, so they are at the another part of the participation. So it's very much different. And then in the paper you see that I separated the levels, and I explain why I place organization in the levels. Something that is important as well to understand is that as we are doing a comparison with Europe and Brazil, we needed to use the same criteria to place them. But if we are going to do it separate, just in Europe and just in Brazil, because some of the practices are so different, maybe we could have different analysis on that as well. And then some conclusions that I included here is that as good practices on the listening process. So first one, to prioritize listen in the implementation phase, especially with actions, behaviors, and methods that allow the staff to dedicate more time to listen over the bureaucratic tasks in the cycles. So we all know that grant management have a lot of bureaucratic tasks. So to find technologic forms of putting more time in the relationships can be a way to improve listening practice. to have an internal listening culture also that is very important. So it's almost impossible to listen externally if you don't listen internally. So to improve the listening culture inside the organization is a point to start. And also we saw that organizations that use agile methodologies are flexible, are less hierarchical, they give more agency to staff to make decisions. They are also listening better externally. 3, and this is also learning that we have from feedback methodology and from the report from Ecotech Consulting, that methods to listen, to support grantee, to listen the primary constituent, it's very important, because it's a way that you create a better relationship with your grantee, and you also give knowledge to your grantee to listen better the primary constituent. Create institutionalized feedback spaces that are free of harm for those raising their voices. So if we don't have institutionalized spaces, we are just going to rely on the quality of the relationship and how power imbalance acts in that relationship. So depending on how much the power imbalance is there, you are not going to listen the truth from your feedback. So that is also very important. One thing that we learn as well is that organizations that say that they shared mistakes and learnings with their grantees, they also open space to the grantees also share mistakes and learnings and to better the relationship, and to talk about power imbalance. So talk openly with the staff about power imbalance is also something that is very much important, and especially to understand how that conversations can turn out to be actions to mitigate power imbalance. Okay. Yes. So that was it. As Rupert said, we will have 2 more publications in Europe and in Brazil. And I want again to thank to Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, to Maecenata Foundation, to my mentor Rupert, to Filea, to Gifi, to Ponte a Ponte, to all participants of this research, and to all feedback field organizations and the organizations that have made other listening research in the field. So you will see that in the paper I also include further resources that are lots of resources about listen that one can use to learn more. And yes, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Luisa. This was a very good presentation. Now, yeah, turn us back to this view. I would now invite you all to ask questions, give comments, yeah, add to the discussion. Who would like to start? Perhaps I will start with one and then give you a little more time to think. Now, if you sort of draw a bottom line, what would you say quite openly? Do you think Brazilian donors and foundations are more flexible, more advanced in listening, or would you say it's the European foundations who are more flexible and more advanced? You're in a safe space in our library. Nobody can assault you, whatever your answer is. But let's have an open answer.
Yes, of course. So I think that's hard, but what I think is Brazilian organizations, because they know better the people that they support, because they live in the same country. Of course, they do not live the same reality. Most of the organizations that are funders, that they are in different social classes to the ones that they support, but they know about what's happening in their city. Sometimes they support projects in their city. They are affected by the inequality, so they know what's happening. So this is something that I guess it creates a level of trust between the organizations and a level of understanding between the organizations that, for me, that's one of the analysis that I did. Sometimes organizations in Europe, they have like fancy and like very complex methods of listening, of scraping data online, for example, of going and doing like surveys, but they don't go there. They don't understand the reality, and they don't talk to people when they are there. So for me, in that sense, organizations in Brazil know better because they know the reality better. So this is one part. But also, one thing that I was very much curious to understand more is it was about power imbalance, because when I asked organizations in Europe, they were very clear with me. Oh, we talk. Oh no, we don't talk. But it was not a taboo at all. And then when I asked for organizations in Brazil, they were like, okay, but what do you mean about it? And I was like, okay, so we have like a power imbalance relation that is already given because of the nature of the relationship. So it happens because you as a funder organization has more resources and they don't. Okay, now I see, but for them it's harder to see that. So I think that, of course, the Brazilian ecosystem would benefit more of start to talk more about power imbalance without being a taboo, so they can understand better what that means into their actions. But overall, I would say that because of the relationship part, because they understand more and they support people in their regions, I would say that they have better listening practice.
Okay, thank you. Megan has her hand up, please.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rupert. Hi, Luisa. I'm coming on video just for this. I really appreciate the very clear way you've laid out all these findings. This has been really fascinating, and in particular, I thought it was interesting how you mapped out the levels of participation. I found that very helpful, and I'm curious. You know, obviously, most of the foundations that you spoke with, both in Europe and Brazil, are sort of in the inform or the consult buckets of participation. And I'm curious if you had a sense of, I would say, why that is, or maybe even more specifically, what it might take to move those foundations along the bucket. You know, do people say, we're in the informing area and we're happy to be there, that's all we want? Or did you get a sense for maybe some of the motivators or the barriers to moving into other areas of participation?
Of course.
Thank you. Luisa, would you like to react?
Yes, of course. First of all, thank you so much, Megan. Megan is from Feedback Lab, so it's from someone that I learn a lot in our exchanges. And yes, I did this analysis in the paper, so I'm just going to go back quickly into the paper here. And one moment, because I don't remember everything in my my head. So the ones that are in the inform level, mainly, so in Brazil, one moment, inform level. Yeah, so in Europe, they are in the firm level because basically they have listening methods, but they don't have any institutionalized form of report back. So that was I used to bucket them from inform to consult. So the ones that are in the inform is that because they listen, but they don't report back. So I would say that the first thing to level up, if they want to level up, as of course, would be to establish a report back a form. And then when they go to consult level, let me see here. Okay, and then when they want to consult level, I also take into account the actions to mitigate power imbalance. Because besides they are having report backing process, they also talk openly about power imbalance. They also have lots of actions. So for example, flexibility in the reporting process, having a staff of the organization responsible for the relationship with the community. So there's someone who the organization knows, the community knows, okay, if something happened, I can go to these people and to this person, and I can give my feedback. So basically is that. But you will find all of that analysis in the page 28 if you want to see exactly, because there are more analyses and there are differences between Brazil and also between Europe. So the one that is in the Empower level, for example, is the one that is has participatory grant making actions, for example.
That's
Thank
very
you.
helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else who wants to speak up, or is there anything in? Put something in the chat. No, I have one other. It's more an observation really than a question. You had one slide showing what was the sort of what was driving people, and it was whether they could communicate or something. And what I thought was quite extraordinary in a way was that thinking was way down on the scale. I mean. Coming from a think tank, obviously, I think I thought, oh, this is quite something, that people are not chosen for their ability to think, or they're not. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just want to go to that list and just to share
somewhere in the middle of, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to share quickly also this, because then we can see again.
Sort of reflecting on what one is doing, reflecting on what one is driving at and things. That is something that I would always think is extremely important, and I'm quite.
Yeah. So we have that think tank.
Yes, I was referring to a different one.
I know.
Yeah.
Whom and how think tanks. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and in Brazil, for example, no one referred to think tanks.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that maybe one thing that they have they said was about research. So lots of organizations said about research. So maybe there's something that we can try to clarify, because I just hear them and then like include it. And organizations in Europe are more like they mention think tanks, but not organization in Brazil. So maybe, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Now, Alexis had her hand up, please.
Yes, thank you so much. And as you were talking, Luisa, I was also kind of following along in the report, and I can see how your presentation really kind of mirrored what you shared there. So excited to dig more into the findings in the report. But curious to hear what examples, if any, you may have heard from foundations of kind of closing the gap in their understanding of feedback. So, and this may be a little bit of what kind of Rupert was just talking about, but how are foundations in either location developing skills around feedback? And to what extent did that seem to be a need that they needed to develop those skills? What examples are you hearing? And then also what recommendations might you have for foundations on how they close that gap?
Yeah, I'm going to like quickly to share the screen on my screen only. on the paper that has it. So, yeah. Okay. So I asked it, yeah, not the best way, but I asked it in Brazil and in Europe about the institutionalized process. So organizations in Europe talked about grantee perception. They talk about having whistleblower lines. And they talk about having events with primary constituents, and they are invited to give feedback. One thing that I felt is that it's this feedback, and then it's super institutionalized, so it's super formal as well. So it's important, but they almost see this feedback to happen when there is a problem, because they are just like in the grantee report perception, that's very important. They have the space, but it's not something that happens naturally into the relationship. The whistleblower lines is basically just when something bad happened. So they don't ask like frequently, okay, did you like it? It's more like what went wrong. So something that could be changed is that, for example, if European organizations already have all this complex whistleblower line in place, they could also have a line that is like to change the idea of what went wrong, of what we could do better. So that's something that they could use, but that needs to have also something in their mindset. And in Brazil, they just mentioned frequent surveys, because I guess a grantee report is just starting right now in Brazil. It's something that is very expensive for the organizations. And they also, in Brazil, they mention evaluation workshops, so having workshops with the organizations. And in Europe, the only non-institutionalized form of feedback, it was meetings. So they say, okay, we have that, or we have conversations. But in Brazil, they say that they have conversations, that sometimes they have third-party evaluations, that they use the reporting process. For example, when they ask frequent reporting process, they ask feedback, and they also mention having the culture of feedback. So besides they did not mention so many institutionalized forms, they showed more non-formal forms. So it's something that for me, it's something that also reflects on the relationship that they have, that it's more more relationship that is stronger. But yes, to be honest, I'm not very sure about how they want to change that, because during the interviews, I also needed to explain the concept of feedback. So I think there is like a lot of space to make the concept of feedback also more popular between organizations, so they can see the need for that and understand that as like a good practice. That's something that's going to better their impact. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else who wants to join the discussion? Can't see anybody. Our time is sort of coming to an end, but there would still be an opportunity if somebody still wants to speak up. Can't see anybody. So obviously you've made yourself very clear. You've made yourself understood. The publication, of course, is available free of charge from our website, and will be circulated so that you can all read it up and disseminate it. It's under a Creative Commons license, so anybody can disseminate it and introduce it to further readers. Okay, Luisa's fellowship has now come to an end, but happily for us, she is staying on in Berlin, Germany, working for an NGO, so we will be in touch. And if you wish to communicate with her and don't know her address, you can always send it to us, and we will certainly forward it to her and make sure she gets it. With that, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Luisa, for making this presentation. And yeah, even at this point, although we've said it before, thank you for being with us as a German Chancellor Fellow, and all the very best for your future career in civil society and philanthropy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rupert. Thank you so much to everyone. I'm happy to have everyone here and to share this. And yes,
So,
good night.
So good night, or perhaps for some of you it's somewhere during the day, or even good morning. But anyway, all the best to you all, and join us again at some other event. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, I think we can.
There's still some people here.
Yes. I think we can now.
Can go. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Nice evening, and we'll be in touch anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye for now. Bye.